Before we start this podcast, I want to definitely remind you of a sponsor for Fresh of the Word, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest. In the world of wrestling where there's hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads, don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. So if you'd like to discuss a possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or even Zubaz, then drop them a line at 20by20apparel.com. That's the number 20x, the number 20apparel.com. And also check out their enamel pin line. It's super cool.
Fresh is the word.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. And like always, we have the freshest of topics and we have the freshest of guests for you. The guests for this episode are Joyce Marie Fitzpatrick and Brian Shackelford, the co-producers and co-directors of the documentary The Color of Medicine, the story of the Homer G. Phillips Hospital, which is the first all-black hospital located in St. Louis that also medically trained the first black physicians and nurses in the United States. Using this documentary as a framework, this discussion with Joyce and Brian puts into the account the world that we're living in right now during this COVID pandemic and also the recent Black Lives Matter protest. Many of the stories of the Homer G. Phillips Hospital really parallel things still happening today with black people in America. This talk with Joyce and Brian is an excellent example of the type of discussions that really need to happen between white and black people these days in the wake of all these protests and a lot of the things that we're hoping that white people will learn about the experience of black people in America. Joyce and Brian not only share things from the history of the hospital, but their own experiences in this episode. So, this is definitely like something you should really pay attention to. and try to have these discussions with other people if you're a white person who's trying to understand what's going on more, or you're understanding more and really want to check some family members or friends or whatever. There's a lot of good, I've said this before, there's a lot of good resources. I would just Google it, basically do the work. But before I get into this discussion with Joyce and Brian, there's a few things I want to share, both good and bad. I took a little time off the past couple of weeks because a lot of the things that I've been consuming online has been weighing heavily on me, and I just needed to chill. I needed to find some fun things these days, and I did. Usually when I'm down like that, there's a few things that I do. Watch Japanese wrestling, binge on Deezus and Mero, whether they're podcast or video clips online from any of their shows. Lately, I've been really into just going back and watching the videos and the podcasts for the Shaggy and the Creep. That's Shaggy 2 Dope from the Insane Clown Posse. All of that stuff is so cool to just... You can go back anytime, But the thing I really dug deep into recently, this past couple of weeks, is K-pop, man. I love K-pop so much. My favorite K-pop group is Blackpink, and they just dropped a new single, and it's called How You Like That, and it is a banger. Yes. Oh, so good. Man, and I guess he got another pre-single coming out later on, and a full album later this year. Oh my goodness, yo, man! And I checked out some clips from this DVD that they put out with their Tokyo Dome shows from late last year and I think beginning of this year. Man, yo, they had like an all black band backing them, and they were cooking, yo, man. I was like, oh man, whoo, man, like, yo. But yeah, that put me in a really good mood. It always does. K-pop, I love K-pop. Blackpink. A group that that isn't together anymore, but I went back and checked out their work and their solo stuff was Big Bang. Yo, another great group, man. There's a there's a group now called Everglow. They dropped a like a little mini album earlier this year, and the song "Dum Dum Dum." Oh man, yo, that's a banger too, man. That's one of the dopest K-pop songs of 2020 thus far. But yo, I'm excited that my ladies from Blackpink are back. They came out with another banger, like always. Go listen to that. How you like that? The video was slamming. Yo, I'm ready. Yo, I'm happy. Blackpink. A little sad news. A friend of mine, a friend of the Detroit music community, uh, DJ and promoter. His real name is Jonathan Davis, but he goes by DJ Calico. He passed away this past week. He was like the nicest, sweetest person like you'll ever met, and like I used to just he was like the ambassador for Detroit when it comes to like dubstep, like the real dubstep, like the stuff from the UK dubstep, like the real OG dubstep, dubstep and bass music, drum and bass. He used to, man, he always put on, like for years, he used to, he put on weekly events, bigger events, one-off events. He brought so many like bass music, electronic music, dubstep artists that you would never see in Detroit. He would, bring them cats. A lot of times, man, he had to dig deep in his own pockets to, to make that stuff happen. But he made things happen. He gave opportunities to so many people, man. And it's a huge loss, for our community. Like, so, man, it really hurts. But, I'm not gonna be sad. I'm gonna celebrate the life of Calico because he really touched all of us, man. And me and him were we always talked about doing something together, DJing together, but it just not we'd be like, yo, we'll figure it out later, and it just never happened, man. And things just got with the whole COVID thing or DJing stuff just got put on halt. People are just doing live streams and just recording mixes and like me and him never got to do something together. But okay, the top two, I wasn't able to go to a lot or a majority of his parties that he put on, but the two top favorites were Africa High Tech, which is Steve Spacek and Mark Pritchard. That was at the Works. Man, they put on a killer show. Man, I had so much fun at that. It was so good to see them cats. And then another time was he had like two of the OGs, man, from like the UK, like dubstep producer DJs, cats who like really paved the way for that stuff, N-Type and Hatcha, and had that was another joint at the Works, and I had so much, I remember that night because like I went there with this girl I was seeing at the time, and we got mad drunk even before there, got mad drunk while we were there. We were dancing in front of the speakers, making out in front of the speakers. It was just a blast. She wanted to go out to the car and do more stuff. And I was like, no, man, I'm hearing all these classic records, man. The classic UK dubstep records. Like from the OGs, spin on them, man. I am not going to see this, man. I had to, kept on saying, no, we're not going to go, fool around in my car, man. I want to, this is I finally, crumbled, over the pressure, and we went out and fooled around in my car. But I still had a fucking blast, It was just yeah, we were wilding out, but I had a blast because just heard all the OG stuff, man, all the OG dubstep records, man, like the from the 2000s, man. Like, oh, that was killing it. So, yo, man, just a thanks to Calico for making stuff like that happen. He was a pillar of like the music community. Like he really, in a time when there's like so many of these, a lot of posers, a lot of fake fronting DJs and producers in the electronic music community. These cats who get paid a ton of money and who are have other people ghost producing, and they wilding out, being disrespectful to other artists. Being disrespectful to women. Bad things coming out. Cats like Calico, 100%. They're real deal people, man. He was man. It, I'm getting I'm going to like celebrate his life. I'm sad. And what was so great is that like the music community in Detroit, they like my homie Aaron, Ronan Selector, he put up a GoFundMe for 5,000 to try to raise $5,000 for his funeral, and people did double that in a day, like 10,000, doubled it. I don't know what it's at now, but people came out and really supported, and made sure we can send off Calico in the right way. So much love to everybody who donated to that GoFundMe for Calico's a funeral. But so he touched us greatly. He helped out everybody. He made opportunities for everybody. He like and plus he was a funny dude, and man, me and him geeked out about dubstep and bass music, but also like heavy. He was a heavy metalhead. He was a metalhead totally, and talk about wrestling and stuff, man. Like he was just a cool guy, man. And man, I'm gonna miss him, dog, because he was my type of dude, man. He was like we were cut from the same cloth, man. He was a cool cat. We'll always remember you, Calico, man. We love you, and you'll always be in our hearts. Every time I hear some old dubstep, I think of you. Another thing I want to talk about before we get into this interview is this film that I just checked out. It's called Slay the Dragon, and it's about all the depths that our politicians will go into, gerrymandering in order to, you know, favor an election to one political party side. And it centers on the work of this Michigan activist, Katie Fahey, and her organization, Voters Not Politicians. It shows how gerrymandering, the practice of redrawing electoral maps to serve a single party, poses such a great threat to democracy. It's and I thought I knew some stuff about it, but when you really see how things are broken down in this documentary, and it doesn't just focus on the Michigan stuff, it focuses on everywhere. She took this campaign like everywhere, and she made some headway. It like she opened up a lot of people's eyes. People understood how like how this takes away the vote. It's a very it's it's a it's eye opening. You think you hear about gerrymandering and but you might not know to the depths that people have you know gone to really use this practice to get their way. Especially and in the last case it was like the Republicans, and it's like this is crazy. And next year, 2021, will be a redistricting year. After the census, a lot of it's based off the census. That stuff that you get in the mail and you probably didn't do. You need to do the census because that really goes into a lot of them redrawing these electoral maps. So, and there's already states that have, put into laws in place where people can't do this practice the way that they've been doing. So go check out Slay the Dragon. You can go to the website, which is slaythedragonfilm.com, and there'll be more information about the movie, about, with trailers. There's a lot of information about what you can do for the cause. They even have like social media stuff that you can use to post on any of your platforms. It's available. It's been available on DVD, but then it's on all the digital platforms now: Apple TV, Google Play, Prime Video, Fandango now, and much more. It just came out. Today, while I'm, July 7th, as I'm recording this. So I definitely, think you should check this out because it'll be big eye opener about what's going on in these elections. And like right now, in the time when people are trying to get, the orange guy out of office, it's you'll see that every election is important, even the midterms, the stuff for the House and the Senate. All that stuff matters in regards to how how we get our presidents and how everything works. So you'll see if you watch this documentary, you will see like the depths this goes and how it affects everything. And one more thing, my Renaissance Soul podcast, my Detroit music podcast. I said I was gonna, drop it on the 22nd of June, but like I mentioned earlier, you know, got stressed out. Things were I was burnt out. So hopefully that the first episode back of the Renaissance Soul podcast will be coming next Monday. All right, now after a word from our sponsor, let's get into this discussion with Joyce Marie Fitzpatrick and Brian Shackelford, the producers and directors of the documentary The Color of Medicine, the story of the Homer G. Phillips Hospital. All right, welcome back to the Fresh is the Word podcast. And like always, we have the freshest of topics we talk about, along with the freshest of guests. And the topic for this episode is going to be the documentary, The Color of Medicine, the story of the Homer G. Phillips Hospital. It tells the astonishing history of the first all-black hospital in St. Louis, but also recognizes and celebrates the achievements of the brave healthcare workers who are among the first black physicians and nurses to be medically trained in the United States. It's also a groundbreaking documentary that sheds light on the disparity between the medical treatment that the African American community receives opposed to others. And with me, I have the directors of this documentary, Joyce Marie Fitzpatrick and Brian Shackelford. How you doing today?
How you doing, my
Hi,
man?
Kelly.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having us.
Great,
Thank you,
great.
guys. Thank you.
Like to start things off, like I received this screener a couple months ago
Hmm.
before all the major protests have been going on, in America, hell, around the world, in
Hmm.
light of the killing of George Floyd. But
Hmm.
I didn't watch it. I was being lazy, and I didn't watch it until after the protests happened.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of glad I did because this documentary took a whole new shape after seeing what's going on right now. Kind of when you look back to like the journey of making this documentary, like why did you do it in the first place, and what does it
Hmm.
look like in your minds now after these current protests?
Hmm.
You want to go
You go ahead.
first?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Joyce.
Oh, okay. Well, first off, thank you so much, Kelly, for having us on your show. We
Yeah,
Hmm.
really appreciate it. And we're so glad that you got an opportunity to watch the documentary
yeah,
after all of these issues have risen,
right,
because I do believe it resonates differently
Yep.
because of that. Still is significant before the protests began, but even more significant now that the protests have begun.
right,
Homer G. Phillips Hospital was established in 1937 in the city of St. Louis, Missouri, in North Missouri. And when we did this documentary, which took a very long time to do, it held a significant place in our hearts because the person who brought the story to us was one of the physicians who had trained at that hospital, and his father was one of the first graduates of that hospital in 1937. He was part of the very first graduating class. It's
Wow.
so significant. It's like someone graduating from Harvard or Princeton, the very first class.
Right.
I mean, it held such a significance. And, being able to do that documentary for us, at that time, we knew it was significant. And because it took the years that it took just to bring it to the masses, only because it had such a personal connection with the people of St. Louis and around the world that people wanted to see it. So we just kept having private screenings for almost a year or two. And then finally, because we were exhausted, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, that we wanted more to share it more with the world. So that is when we decided, let's go ahead and make it a little bit more available, or rather a lot more available to the public. And that journey is what got it to where it is now. But no one in their no one would have ever predicted where we are at this point in history.
Right.
And again, what it proves is that history continues to repeat itself.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that this hospital, when the time that it was established, focused on African Americans, the reason why was because of exactly where we are today, is the disparities in healthcare for minorities, period. And that also goes for other ethnicities as well, not just African Americans, Jewish, Hispanic, Native American. Most people of color have always had to go outside the box just to receive regular medical care. And this is one of the most premier examples of that. And that's where I see it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the documentary really, when I think back to it now, it just captures so much of what's going on right now, from the redlining to where Blacks were allowed to live, for all the way. And it's what it is it's everything builds on itself, which leads us to a much bigger issue. What you have then and what you still have now is a community fighting to be acknowledged, fighting to be heard. And then the great thing about our story is you see an oppressed community, but the people within that oppression still excel, and they provide not just good health care, the best health care to their community. And I keep going back to it with one of the people we interviewed stated in the film is that these people in this area became the best because they could not get the best.
Right.
And that is a theme that is so prevalent that we continually have to do. But it seems like when we think we've taken so many steps forward, we realize we're still back fighting for the same initial thing we were fighting for years ago.
Right.
And this film, at the time we released it, I'll say our distribution team was very interested in the fact that, wow, we have an avenue, because they were very interested in tying it to the whole, because COVID had just really became a big thing.
So
yeah, definitely. And also we were just hearing about the disparity in COVID within the African American community. So it's like, well, if we look at this documentary, the history will show the reasons why. And it's the same. It's a good thing when you look at it from a filmmaker, from why we have an angle to attach our project to. But as an African American, you're sitting back like, are we still fighting for the same things that we've been fighting for? It's just that constant thing of how far have we really come. But it's a great thing to have your film making a voice. That's a huge thing. Starting the conversations, because that's what's happening right now. All these conversations are finally being started. Very difficult conversations that we've avoided for years, and it's great to have a project that is a part of starting those conversations.
Yeah, because right now, along with having a global pandemic with a virus, like a sickness virus, we're also shedding light on a global pandemic in regards to racial disparity. And you see the parallels in both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really can. I'm sorry, were you about to say something, Joyce?
No, I was just in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you really can, and it's I mean, honestly, and the point of making these projects, that was not our intent. Our intent always is basically telling the best story that we can possibly tell. And then also with a documentary, the thing that is really hard is to tell a story and be very um, kind of what is this objective about what you're telling, because you want to present both sides.
Yeah,
And sometimes,
non-bias, just
exactly, you'll hear material or stories that you really identify with, but also you want to present the opposite side of that. So it's really it's sometimes difficult to remove yourself, but you're presenting both sides and removing your opinion completely and letting the audience decide. But what
right.
it is just the audience is starting that conversation.
Because there was definitely like white people that contributed to the success
Yes.
of this hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that you guys did that, and
Yes.
it's showing that you guys can be non-biased about this story, that
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily just a group of people. It's also a system that causes this happen, and that there's people that are going to be there for the greater good and will
Mm-hmm.
help get a hospital like that off the ground.
That's very
Yeah,
true. That's
and
very
to
true.
touch on what you both were saying, Brian was referring to one of the, there was an historian that we interviewed, Mr. Wright. He's the one that talked about because they couldn't get the best, they had to become the best.
Yeah.
Because during that time, since there was segregation, everyone lived in a segregated community.
Mm-hmm.
So there were and everyone lived in the same community, which were doctors, lawyers, and there was no separation. There wasn't the poor lived here and the rich lived here. Everyone lived in the same community.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned about the inclusion of white doctors and Washington University, who you're probably referring to, that actually helped get the
Yeah.
hospital off the ground. That was still, even though they did that, it was almost like most Black hospitals at the time had to be accredited by a white hospital, which seems unbelievable that they would have to do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that was why the Washington University was part of that historic moment. And then also the fact that the President of the United States and his wife, President Roosevelt, Eleanor, was the one that got the WPA, the New Deal started, so that areas like St. Louis could have their own hospital and all the bridges and all those things, because if it were not for them, those communities would have suffered. And it was very interesting because we did try to show both sides. We tried to actually reach out to the former mayors and governors that should still be alive today, and they didn't want to respond. We just had to go basically on the news clippings
Right.
and such to show that what they contributed and did not contribute. But we will say, in regards to Washington University, that they recognized the importance of this documentary, and they actually held a honorary banquet for Dr. Robinson, his daughter, myself, and Brian. And they actually gave us an honorarium in honor of the film.
Oh, nice.
Which
Nice.
was amazing. And a huge plaque to note the importance of this film.
Congrats.
And
Nice.
we were really honored. And Dr. Will Ross, who you saw in the film, the gentleman with the bow tie, he was amazing. He's the gentleman who was over this department, which was a lecture series, because one of the significant trainers of the hospital, it was a friend of his whose father was Dr. Hampton. Henry Hampton was the first medical director, more or less, of Homer G. Phillips. And then after that, the other gentleman, I think it was Dr. Sinkle, took over. But Dr. Hampton's son was a friend of his, and he passed away. So he really knew the significance of the hospital, and he was instrumental in getting us that honorarium. So, and these are things, again, that we had no idea what were going to happen. We just went into researching and getting all this information, and it just got more and more interesting the more we delved into it historically. And it is really an amazing story. And we're so glad to get it out there.
Right.
Definitely.
There's something that I noticed about this story, and it always happens when there's progress being made, is that, and there's it's this thing about having mixed feelings about the progress that's being made, and there's the
Mm-hmm.
obvious ones about why we're even doing this, but a part that really hit home with me was once Homer J. Phillips was opened, they're
Mm-hmm.
talking about you're talking about what he would have thought about this. And part of him would have been proud to be named
Mm-hmm.
after it. Then the other's like, well, this is still segregation, and he was totally against that. What's your what's your thoughts about like just the segregation, but in comparison to black people having their own things, even
Mm-hmm.
today.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I think for me, growing up during the time that I grew up in the Midwest, and Dr. Robinson, who was featured in the film, was someone that I grew up with that I actually saw going to work every day. And I didn't live in a segregated community. The neighborhood was all African American professionals in an upper middle class neighborhood, but we were surrounded by mostly a white neighbor townships and all of
Yeah.
that. And but it was interesting because the city of St. Louis, it had a different climate. It still had a little bit of segregated feelings like racism, even in the history when we were looking it up. To be able to show how Black people excelled during that time, it was kind of the norm for us, because I remember having uh, a Black doctor who was actually a doctor that some of the doctors there knew years ago when I was a baby. Also having a Black veterinarian for our dog, Black service stations, Black pharmacies, everything
Yeah.
was Black. And you really didn't feel that you were being segregated. You just lived it
Right.
because that was how it was.
Right, right.
And in that community, Brian and I worked on another documentary called Evening at the Hungate. Have you heard of Troy, Michigan at all?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we were fortunate enough to work with Rachel Stratman, who is a director as well, and her and Brian co-directed another documentary we did that featured William Hungate, who was the senator, I believe, that helped with segregation in the city of St. Louis in 1980. And we were just shocked at that because 1980 had not, the city of St. Louis had not been desegregated. I mean, that was like
Right,
insane. That
right.
tells you how far along, racism continued in St. Louis.
Yeah,
So
and
just
how
imagine.
close all of this really
Oh my God.
is.
Yeah. This
Yeah,
was in like the
yeah.
last 30 or 40 years. That's ridiculous that that would just be happening. But it was really great that even he championed, people being together. But I think though, the community, which was brought up by one of the other interviewees, about we actually thrived better in that environment, even though it was segregated.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, being a part of that as a child, you didn't feel like you were being separate from anyone. You just felt that you, because it just feels good to see your own people
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
doing things. Yeah, so you didn't feel like you were missing out on anything at that time. That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a definite mixed bag. 'Cause I was going to say the exact same thing that you're saying. When you're there's definitely something to, and it was a great point that was made by the doctors that we interviewed. There is definitely something to when you're training and you're learning in an environment from people that look like you. There's a safety net around that, especially when you think about that time
Yeah.
training to be a doctor. You're trying to do something that you're already seen as an anomaly. So, but it's not that strange because you're looking at somebody who's already done it. And I think there is a very kind of comforting feel about that. But then it's weird because I think about my experience when I wasn't born in California. We moved. I was born in Racine, Wisconsin, but we moved out here when I was 5. And I remember getting into the school systems. Everybody was telling my parents to get him out of this school system and put him into this school system because this school system is going to fall apart. Your son is bright and he's going to learn more over here. I basically went and I was always one of the few black kids at predominantly white schools. That was the education that I got.
Yeah.
And I and it's twofold, because I think I had a very good education, and I completely understand my parents at the time wanting to give us the best. My point in making that is, it's the same thing that happened with these doctors. The moment any community that is already cut off from the rest of the community, when they thrive and there are all of a sudden specialists in those communities, they're plucked from those communities now to be part of the greater society. So that community that has built up its own people collides again, because you come in and you've taken the best of us.
Take the best.
Again. Right. So it's twofold, because I think about that with the school system. Were those schools that I was going to that bad, or was it because all the good people were being pulled, so what was left was something nobody wanted to invest in? And I'm thinking about that happened to me in the school systems, and it's happened then, and it's a twofold thing how I feel about, because I can understand why we needed that to happen, but at the same time, it pulled the livelihood from a community, and it did the same thing there. So there needs to be kind of like a twofold, instead of pulling the best. Maybe there's some type of integrate. It's such a difficult question that I don't have the answer answer to it. And I definitely really appreciate you asking that question, but it touches on so many different things. And I think that's why you see so many people in the streets today. There's no easy answer to this, but at least we're comfortable enough. We're at the point where we can ask the question and have a conversation about it and hear both sides to it, because there's always both sides to every one of those questions.
And it's interesting too, to touch on that. I was really fortunate with my family, because my parents were kind of crazy anyway. They loved to move, so it was interesting. And the reason I bring that up is because we were in Indianapolis, which, like I said, the community, even though it was where it was, there was mostly blacks in that neighborhood, and then we were surrounded by white. So I had a lot of white friends, and during that time there were no other minorities at my school. It was just white and black, and it was at my high school, it was mostly white. And like Brian was saying, we were like the only black kids. There weren't, but there was a black community of kids. Like, everybody knew everyone. But then I got the opportunity. Well, it's kind of strange. Started off in a grade school that was all black, had a black principal. Then my parents did the move to the suburbs, supposedly, where we had white principal, and we had a black vice principal, but I didn't have any more black teachers, which is weird. So then we moved from there down to Mississippi, was the last place I lived before I graduated high school. I had 1 year of high school in Mississippi. And I'm glad that I had that, because we went to an all black high school again. I mean, for me, that was a first. And it was a really different dynamic. I had all black teachers. There was no whites at all in this school. And mind you, this was in 1979, 1980. I was like, oh my God. It was really like a culture shock for me, because, I went from black and then all white and then all black again. But I'm glad I did, because there was such a difference. It was such a community. Like, everyone knew everyone, everybody worked together. And I mean, it wasn't easy, but we excelled at that school. But it was just a totally different vibe. And I'm glad I got that. And then I moved to California, which had so many different ethnicities. I didn't know how to deal with it, but I learned. And I appreciated it, but it definitely taught me and showed me just pretty much what Homer D. Phillips was doing, showing you how you can be, in the best, but around your own people. And I don't like that message that people say, well, if we pull blacks out of a school of their own, that they'll be treated better in a white school. I mean, I don't like that, because it's saying that our people aren't, good enough to produce the best. That's the only thing I don't appreciate about that type of attitude. Right. I think you can do better and do well in both environments. It's just the money that schools could be given to give them a better education, if you know what I mean.
Like, during times like this, where there's a lot of protesting going on, there's always the kind of like the idea that more black communities need to invest in their own communities, like have their own things, their own businesses and whatnot. Like, here in 2020, do you think there is a good version of segregation? What's the difference between is there a good version of that? What does that look like? And what is the difference between just having a black-owned businesses and supporting your people or your neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. We were just talking about that actually, because with the climate that we're in right now, and with people saying, with all of the different big companies, trying to show their support.
Yeah.
But the question that I raise with that is, where were those companies before COVID and before that? Why did the need to do that now, like donating to HBCUs and all those things? Why?
Yeah, and when people start protesting and even it gets to rioting, they feel like their neighborhood isn't theirs. So there's always that idea of, all right, let's build our own neighborhood. Let's segregate, So what, like what does that, to continue on, what does that look like in 2020?
In a way, it's kind of, I think it would be literally, it's not, and I think it's really a hard thing, because it's not that African Americans want to be completely isolated. I just think they want to be one of the choices at the table.
Yeah.
I think is what it is, so that people can choose whatever they want instead of constantly being funneled to only have, this certain type of offer. It's like we were talking about, like if you wanted to buy a car, you should be able to, buy a car from all types of different, vendors, as opposed to this one type of vendor. Because every time you go to purchase a car, that same vendor is who you see. I mean, you see it all day long. I mean, even to this day, when you're in your local city and you see, commercials, you don't see African Americans talking about, oh, here's my cars, come to the Fitzpatrick dealership and buy a car. You don't see that. You did see it a long time ago, but you don't see it now. Right, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because of the unavailability of loans, or like Brian was mentioning before, redlining. I mean, that's the thing too, even with the communities. Yes, you do have a choice, but then when you move to those communities, you're ostracized, you're treated badly. And it's like, why? Why is that?
There's always like this sense that like it almost is like this underlying sense that like black products are inferior. Like, and that when you say black owned, that there's all these like myths that are attached to it,
That's very true. Very true. But then go ahead, Brian.
I think even in the way before now, that when people spoke of those things, it was always, even in their voice, it was always, where understand you're going to get a product, but it's going to be less than what you would normally be getting. It's always like, oh yes, there's these other things that we should support during this amount of time. Like, hey, you can support it during Black History Month. Here's 28 days, or at least 27 days we'll give you to go support this stuff. It's I mean, it's a difficult conversation, but I honestly do believe it's not complete separation. It sounds like complete separation because it's a voice that hasn't been heard that keeps speaking louder and louder and louder. That's why, like, prime example, I always shake my head in debates when I hear people say, well, it's not Black Lives Matter, it's all lives matter. Yes, but we're not talking about the lives that are being snuffed out. We're talking about the lives that are in danger.
Yeah, exactly. And when you pinpoint it to the people that lives are in danger, in the long run, it'll be better for everybody.
So, exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think a true vision of how it works is literally, if you go to a store, I should have the option, in living in my community, I should have an option to go to a store that's reflective of the community I live in. I should have an option to go to a store that's owned by a Latino, that's owned by a Black, that's owned by a Muslim. It should be reflective, because every community you live in is going to be a little bit different. It should be reflective of the community you live in. And with people, the thing that gets really frustrating, where it goes from protesting to rioting, is what people are asking for are basic human rights.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You have a people that are asking to be acknowledged. I think what Joyce was saying, what people really want is just an opportunity to come to the table.
Sit at the table.
And exist.
I compare it to filmmaking. You're really, especially as an independent, all that you're trying to do is to get into the room and be heard. You can tell me no, but can I at least get into the room to present my idea? we aren't even being let into the room, and
Right,
that's the problem.
Yeah.
and being seen as equal too, because like Brian says, you're in the room. It's just like, I know for me growing up, before I went into film, I wanted to be a doctor, but more in a veterinarian option. But I got an opportunity because I lived near those professions. I saw Black people doing those professions.
Yeah.
So it gave me the option mentally to even go there. The problem is, for some young Black kids and other minorities, they live in a community where they don't even see themselves in those positions. So they don't ever think. And that's why when they watch television, why they only see, like a lot of people say, oh, Black kids always want to be basketball players. Well, you're not showing them anything else.
That's
So
all
what
they
are
grew up
supposed
on
to
is
do?
watching sports.
Yeah,
That's the only thing that they saw. You saw Michael Jordan and whoever else.
Exactly. So if they're not seeing themselves in another avenue, then they're not going to do that. Like, it's great. I mean, but there's nothing wrong with sports. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying,
No.
why do they think golf excelled when Tiger Woods started playing? Because
it's
now
visible.
People see themselves.
Yeah.
So it will work the same way in skateboarding, skiing, any sport you put out there, or any type of job or whatever. If people of color see themselves in it, then they'll do that. And when you were talking about with the products and vendors, the same thing. Now, yes, everyone has uniqueness, especially African Americans, when it comes to hair care products and things like that.
Yeah.
But we still can use the same facial products to an extent. We all wear the same clothes. So why is it that there was a Black woman who started a clothing line or something at Target, and she got like bombarded with insults, people saying, get out of this store, who do you think you are? I'm like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. Why wouldn't she be able to sit at the same table as other people? That's all that we ask for.
And
so
she's like, other people can wear her clothes too.
Exactly. We all have the same body parts,
Right. I think it gets so much to a point where I think African American products and services aren't being supported, that the voice to champion these services has become so loud. Again, it sounds like, don't use anything else. No, they're not saying that.
No, yeah, we're not.
We champion these products also. When you're going out, it shouldn't even be. It's the fact that the problem is even in the separation already. Why is it that when I'm going out, I can go buy products or I can go buy African American products? Even in the presentation, that's how systematic it is. We don't even understand. Even in the presentation of it, there's these products and then there's these other products out here. So now you're basically outside knocking on a door with a product that's been told inferior, and now come in and sell it. Who wants it?
Right. Why can't it just be like, you want to buy this product, and so happen it's Black owned?
Exactly. I bet you. The funny thing is, if they did Black products, like you see some of these Burger King commercials, like, try that. And now that you have it, that's a Black owned product. People would be amazed, but knowing it's a Black owned product, before they'll never want to try it. Your biases are already being formed, and it's so subconscious and systematic. It's rooted in all of us. It really is.
And the interesting thing too that Brian brought up in the movie, in The Color of Medicine, the story of Homer G. Phillips Hospital, that is one of the points that the doctors brought up who were interviewed. Dr. Earl Robinson, who brought us the story, and we were thankful for him to do that. It's actually his baby that we were able to get all of this started, and we thank him and his daughter, Rebecca Robinson, for bringing the story to us. He talks about how they, like I mentioned earlier, about having to be accredited through Washington University, but they had to constantly prove themselves. Like, even there's a scene, you remember the scene in the film where the one doctor was telling them that this particular diagnosis was a particular thing. I don't want to give away so people can see it. And then when the white doctor who was overseeing it said, it couldn't possibly be that, you don't know what you're talking about. And then it ends up being exactly what the Black doctor said it was. It's like, why is it that they have to constantly prove themselves? It's like why can't you just take their word for it? It's like they have to constantly be, validated by someone white. And that it's like, and who says the white person is saying the right thing?
Right.
That's not always the case. They don't know everything, just like we don't know everything. But I just think that's wrong. I just think that's wrong. And we still do that today. Like if you walk into a room, Brian and I talk about this all the time. Because, and I've actually had people when I was a child, that Fitzpatrick is my father's name. So that's my maiden name, Fitzpatrick. And when I was a kid, one of the school teachers who was white kept asking me about my name. So when I went home and told my mother had to go up to the school because she's like, why are you asking my daughter about her name? That's her name. She's like, why does she have an Irish name? It's the stupid stuff like that. Right, it's like there's always this question as to everything that we're about when we can never just be accepted. Yeah. There's always an issue behind it,
Right.
There's a part of the Color of Medicine that talks about the nurses, the women of this story. They, when they came in, they were taught not just to be good nurses, but to be all around, just well-rounded people. They went to plays, they went to sporting events, they went to everything. Women in general, during that time had their own struggles, but when you're a woman of color, that's even more, there's even more struggles. Like, talk about sort of, the idea that, what they wanted to instill in these women at this hospital.
I think that, and that's a great question. And just to reiterate on that, even though they were all women, there were actually 2 male nurses that existed as well. We actually met one, but he had been interviewed in a previous documentary about Homer G. Phillips. But the latter gentleman we did not get to interview, but he did get a chance to see the documentary. But that was the way the times were back then. There just weren't that many men. But I believe that the reason why the women were cultured that way is because, as we always are, judged differently, and they wanted these nurses to, in case someone came in, what if they were at an opera and someone passed out or something and they needed to be a help? They just wanted these people to be well-rounded and cultured so that they could provide the best customer service, because being a nurse is almost like a nurse is a unique position in those times, because not only did they have to have best customer service, they also had to know as much as the doctors. Because the ones that we interviewed stated that we had to know the instrument that the doctor needed before he asked for it. You had to be extremely intelligent to be a nurse during those times. And so we felt that, based on what you saw in the interviews, is that these nurses felt, that they were taught by the nursing supervisors, you have to be cultured and you have to be able to approach everyone in a very kind and accommodating way, because you don't know who you're going to be helping. A nurse is like, that they say, Florence Nightingale. You may see people in all walks and shapes of life, and you need to be able to deal with them. So they wanted them to be cultured that way. That's how the interpretation that I had with the nurses. Brian,
I think that's right on. It's I take it back to with the head nurse said nursing at that time was a career. Right. Now it's a job, and that's how they really embodied everything that was going on. It was a career choice to them. And I also think that with that hospital, Homer G. Phillips living in the Ville, and the way that the community was structured, when you're going out, you're representing that hospital within your community. So it was twofold. It's one, the pride that you had, the excellence of what you had achieved, because again, these people became comfortable being the anomaly, but also it was, you're going through a community of younger Black folks that are looking at you also, seeing what is possible. And some of them had never seen that before. Like, even when I think about even today, and it's crazy to think about this, 10 years ago, a Black kid could not sit and think and have a reference of what a president of the United States could be. But now that once you see it and somebody else achieves it, it becomes possible. And I think that's because, especially in the African American community, we see it in sports all the time. But now we're putting an emphasis and seeing it in politics and seeing it in film and seeing it in other realms, because with everything that's going on, we're talking about systemic problems that are set up by a system. We have to get in and be decision makers that are affecting the changes that are being made in that system, instead of the people that are always performing. When the people that are making decisions need a break to go watch something on TV, they'll come see us dribble a basketball or do something funny, but then they'll go back and make the decisions. We need to be some of the people going in the room, or at least know that these people are going in the room are truly people that we've put inside that door. That's the power we have, and it all starts with the voting, and to make sure that the black dollar matters, because we do have economic power.
Yeah.
But it's just, and then at the end of the day, to do all of that on a daily basis, it's a lot. It's a big torch to carry. So it can sometimes be such a daunting task. Like everything. Prime example, I remember the big thing when me and Joyce finished this documentary. We had the whole thing broken down on Post-it notes on the wall. When you look at the entire thing, it's too big. It's a mountain that nobody can climb. But if you break it down into, let's just deal with this part here, and then we'll move on and deal with this part, before you know it, the project is done. And I'm hoping that's what we do now, because yes, there's so many problems, from the police system to hiring systems to just there's internalized racism, and so we just have to break it down into smaller pieces and start here. Yeah. Yes.
Because when you think about everything about racism and all in systematic institutional racism, you're like, what, like, where do you start? That's why like, when you think about phrases like all lives matter and everybody should just be kind to others and all that stuff, there's no steps to bettering anything in any of those. So we got to break it down to all these different things and tackle those one on one. And what I'm seeing right now is that a lot of times, and I think this happens a lot of times when these hot button issues come up, whether it's racism or the Me Too movement or something, it inspires other ones that doesn't necessarily step on the toes of the others. Like this week, we've had these protests for weeks, Black Lives Matter and everything. But this week, you're seeing a lot of things about sexual abuse sprouting up, and people are finding the courage to do that because of the climate that we're in. But that's not stepping on the toes of the Black Lives Matter movements.
Right.
That's giving these other people a voice because they're seeing what's happening in the Black Lives Matter movement. So yeah, if we can break it down to these very, digestible, something to tackle, then we can make progress.
That's very true.
That's very true.
Were you about to say something, Joyce? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just in agreement, but it's so true. It's just more or less, like you said, when you can break it down into sections, it's easier to digest. And even when we were making the color medicine, because again, it was so overwhelming, there was so much information. But what was really great about it, this entire thing happened in 42 years. As far as the hospital existing, but there was actually another 10 to 15 years before the hospital was built. That's actually also part of the documentary that people will see when they watch it, which is why we included it. Because when we were doing our research, we asked everyone, that was one of the questions that I asked every single interviewee, was who is Homer G. Phillips? And believe it or not, even a lot of people did not know. They did not know anything about him. And that was one of the goals that we wanted to make sure we made sure people, when they walked away from that movie, they knew who he was. And that was a nice part of the documentary because, like, I like that. Like, I like the, where did this come from? Why did this happen? Who's this name that's on this hospital? What was life like for this community before this thing happened? And and it really, sets it up to all the reasons why this happened, So that's what I really liked about the documentary. Well, thank you. And it also makes you think when you leave the documentary, because there were compliments that we got from parents, from school systems, because they said, we can take this documentary and it covers like 3 or 4 classes. And this was not only in the parochial schools, but in the universities, because they were saying it's teaching us the history. It talks about the history of St. Louis. It talks about the history of Homer Phillips, and it also gives you that opportunity when you're out and about, Kelly. You see a building and has a name on it. Now you stop and think, I wonder why that was named after that person. And then you can actually go and find that information out, because evidently that person did something monumental in their community for this building to be named after them, or at least you hope that they did something monumental.
Yeah, and it goes back to that thing about the topic being really huge to tackle. When you have like this nugget of a person's name to start with, you can start there, and it makes you think like, okay, I can start my own thing too, because it might have been just one person that started it. So like you can start your own thing, in your own life, possibly to do something, to change something in your life or in your community, not this big, you're like, how do I tackle racism? But you could be like, I think I can do something to start it,
No, that's that's a great comment that you made, and a great point. And again, I love the point that you made about liking where it started, because you would not believe how many times we sat and rattled our brain on where did we start, because we have all of this information, and you're realizing all this information isn't going to be in. But the most, I think, important thing of any documentary is definitely the beginning. But one thing that I thought was so paramount was that to tell this story, you have to it's almost, for me, our beginning is like how every story starts. Once upon a time, like every great story starts about that. So to tell this story about all of these great people, you had to understand the time period first.
Yeah.
Once you understand the time period that's going on, then I'm going to tell you about all of these great things that these people did, regardless of what was going on. It really sets the stakes for what was happening at that time, and what we're able to achieve, which is, it's really groundbreaking what they were able to achieve at that time. So many pioneers, and really, like I said, the bar was constantly set high for them, and they constantly
excelled.
Yeah.
Because even today, like you have generations, a black generation that's many generations removed from that time period into times that were a lot different, even though there's certain things that are still going on. So a lot of them might not connect with like what was going on. So when you're able to kind of frame it and visualize and put into words what was going on during that time, maybe these, this younger generation can get more of an idea than sort of like because history gets, revised and revised and revised. I think black folks know that more than anything, Yeah,
it's funny that you bring that up, Kelly, because a lot of the audience demographics that we had, we were actually surprised because we thought, this is totally going to resonate with the older community. But you'd be surprised if you go to the website. We wanted to put, and also on our Facebook page, we uploaded all of whenever we would have a private screening, we would make it a point to interview people right after the screening.
Yeah.
And we would see all these different demographics, different ethnicities, ages. We actually had young females and male doctors or people who were studying medicine and crying at the end, saying, I had no idea that this hospital existed. And this is why Brian had met a young gentleman who said he had thought of stopping his medical training, but after seeing the movie, it gave him the inspiration to continue.
Right. Okay.
And then met another young lady who she broke down and started crying when we interviewed her, because she said this was such an amazing story. It made me really proud to be studying for medicine. And then whenever we would go to screenings, we had families that would come up to us and say, I saw this already, and then I went back and got my children and made them watch it. We had people that came like repeaters, like 3 and 4 times in St. Louis, because they said, my kids need to see this, because they keep thinking, we live in St. Louis and it's boring, it's this, it's that. They have no idea that this facility represented so much. And then we had older people. We had people who lived across the street from the hospital and didn't even know what it was. Right. It's insanity, but it was. We're so proud of that.
Right. I think that's one of the proudest things about the documentary is the point that you touched on is getting out who Homer, because again, I was learning out who Homer G. Phillips was and telling this story, but what this man did and stood for. And then the tragedy is he was assassinated before he ever saw the hospital built.
Yeah, never got to see
it continues, and your heart breaks for this, but you understand what he saw and what he was after, because he knew the excellence that existed in his community. Again, if you just give these people the opportunity, if you just let them in the door, you'll be amazed at what they could do. And he was able to see. Now again, he would have maybe had some issues about it being desegregated, but I think the overall picture and the number of lives that they saved, and you'll see when you see the documentary, the old footage of the people coming in and out of that door. I mean, it looked more like a church than it did a hospital.
It did.
It was definitely the heart of that community. People took so much pride in the fact that they could walk down the street, get good health care. Matter of fact, they'd be at a store and see your doctor go by and point up to your child. You could. That's something you could be one day.
Or the women who were once like treated there are now like nurses there.
Yeah. It was a beautiful thing to see. And what was a beautiful thing is in the interviews, you could see every person that we interviewed kind of left the interview. They were going back in time and reliving and some of these stories were so emotional to them also, that this time that existed, so happy that it existed, but the realization that it's gone and it probably will never come back again. You could see them reliving those moments right then and there. And it's a blessing and an honor to be able to capture that time, because I think it would have definitely been another one of those phenomenal stories of Black excellence that's just swept under the rug. Nobody talks about it.
Yeah, and I felt that, all those interviews, you're like, wow, they were really like, that's something that they like won't forget, they're painting those pictures so vividly, like you knew how important that time in their life was.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
One thing that I wish, we're so glad that the documentary has got distribution and that it's going to be seen worldwide and everything. But what really makes me slightly sad, though, is, we're so glad that someone like you, and we don't get me wrong, we've had a lot of worldwide coverage in so many different ways, but it really saddens me sometimes, because we're such a society that feels, if we had like Jay-Z or somebody narrating it, it would be on, Good Morning America. And I think that's so sad, because there's so many people that really need to see this. And I don't know how far reaching your podcast is, but, for these newscasters out there that could get this on national, we're not doing it for us. It's not us getting this accolades. This story needs to be out there, because we've been told it's like the hidden figures of hospitals.
Right.
And yes, we don't have any celebrities in it. The celebrities are the doctors and the nurses and the community. So I wish that we could get that type of coverage where people can, see it. More people can see it because of that reason.
I feel you on that, 'cause I just saw another documentary. I'm not going to name what it is, but it had all these different celebrities in it, and then it was about the subject, and there was such like there was just, I don't know what the word is, like there's like this chasm between them, like and I'm just like, I was like, I could have just watched this documentary without the celebrities, and I feel what you're saying is that, like, to get attention to these things, like, you have to have like that celebrity voice, a part of it. And I'm sure there could have been somebody that could have done it justice, but a lot of times when they, do that, there's just something that's not working.
Right. And you don't want something like that to take away
from it. Yeah.
Right.
The other voices, but it is. And I think, with, again, the breaking it down into smaller sections, being on podcasts like this and constantly getting it out, and especially with everything that's going on now, it's drawing more and more attention. It's just, it's the constant road of the independent, where
Yeah.
you're constantly saying, putting it out, putting it out, putting it out, and more than that, it really is. Because to me, the way I see it, I would hate to see what I consider these rock stars or these legends leave this earth without their proper dues. Like, to me, their farewell concert or their Hall of Fame being inducted hasn't happened yet. So now we've gotten this story out so people can realize how amazing with these, a lot of these black doctors that are operating today. You have the opportunity to do what you can do in the medical field because of what these people did.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and like you said about Homer, is that he died before seeing any of this happen. He didn't even like get to smell his own flowers, man. And that's
Yes.
happened a lot, especially in the black community, where
Yes,
you
yes.
have these people who have touched society in some way, but something happens, they pass away well before their time,
Yes.
and they made an
Uh-huh.
impact on, and that was something that was very, evident with this. There's another thing that was and without giving too much away about it, that really resonated about what's going on today, is that the sort of the militarization of innocent and unprovoked people, people that are just not violent at all,
Right.
that was happening in this story, and
Mhm.
the gross misuse of power, like talk about that part of the story and what you're seeing these days with the protests and the sort of militarization against these protests.
I know exactly what you're talking about. One of the key people, one of the more powerful storytellers is Mr. Wally Amusa. And he was not a doctor and he was not a nurse and he did not work at the hospital, but he was a political activist. And I was able to meet him, and he was brought to us through our connections in St. Louis. And he was a phenomenal interview. And he opened a lot of doors for us in our research. And he's an amazing speaker, as you could see, very powerful. And he's in our trailer as well. And what we learned during our interview, and I won't give it away, there's a scene where it's very, very powerful that he gives us.
Yeah.
And he told us the reason why that speech or that his answer to the question that I was asking him at that moment was so powerful, because it hurt him so deeply that hospital closed, that the day that it closed, which was August 19th or August 17th of 1979, he never returned to that spot until the day we interviewed him.
Wow.
So you're talking about, we interviewed him in, what year was that, Brian? I think 2017.
17. Yeah.
And you're talking about the hospital closed in 1979. So if you do the math, that's like 50 something years or 60. He said, I've never set foot inside this building since the day it was closed.
Mhm.
And that tells you how powerful it was for him. And it talks about the passion that people have, and it resonates today, because all these people that are risking their lives with COVID-19 nationwide and worldwide to protest for our lives, and that's lives of people of color, period. I mean, these people are our saviors just being out there. It's like, if you're willing to risk your life just to get your point across, this has never stopped, mind you. Our families, our parents, our ancestors, there are people that have died, doing what people are out there doing today. But that's part of the power, part of the appeal of the documentary, and why I think it resonates today, is because the militarization that you're speaking of, it was different back then because people didn't have cell phones, people didn't have computers, but the fact that they were able to come together and rally to fight for something that they wanted to exist, that was a huge statement that I think people really need to see. And I won't give any more away from that, but that's how I feel about it.
Right. I think for me, honestly, it was extremely emotional. I remember coming to that point in the editing, and I was cutting that maybe about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And when I was done, I kid you not, my computer was just covered with tissue. I first of all, even the fact that we say that like they required a military presence to close a hospital. I mean,
Yo,
those two don't even go in the same sentence. They don't make
how?
sense.
That is crazy. When I got to that part, I was like,
Right,
what?
right.
It
Exactly.
makes you mad.
But
It makes you mad.
it really does. It makes you mad. I mean, it breaks your heart with some of those photos and to see how they were transporting the elderly to get them out. But when I think back to it, and I think back to what one of the nurses said, which goes on what Joyce was saying, is they didn't have cell phones at the time, so the first thing that they did was cut off the switchboard.
So they couldn't come.
When you bring in military force like that, I think, and I think another one of our interviewees touches on it as well. Homer G. Phillips, that community, where that hospital, that community was so strong. That's exactly, they brought in military, and let's close that because of not for what the problem was, but what the problem could become.
Yeah.
They knew that we're about to go in and snatch the heart out of the chest of this person, and there's going to be some problems.
Yeah, let's deal with the hard one first, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we can close the other one.
Exactly, because I also think by closing that one and moving as fast as they did, we can almost get in and get out. There's going to be some problems, but if we do this other hospital first and come here, we won't have a chance because the people would literally stand in front and arm, and we'd have to go through them. But if we can sneak in and get in before they kind of even know what's going on, because the doctors and the nurses, no one even knew what was happening. You would think the medical staff would be told so they can work on getting their patients out. We can start this process. No one knew. I can't think of any, and I'm not saying there isn't one in history, but I can't think of any hospital that was forcibly closed.
Yeah, they waited until the surgeries were done that day. Oh yeah, thank you.
Right. It's mind blowing to think what you know. What the sad thing is, when I think about how horrendous and mind blowing that scene is, I hearken it right back to our current president gas bombing, tear gassing protesters to go take a photo
in front of the White House. Yeah.
It's different, but not really. It's that same mentality that allows it to continue today. Where that's coming from and the view you have of those people, it's the same view you have of these people, which is not as people, but as things that need to be removed and can be removed. Right. And operating that way, it's just heartbreaking when you can talk to people and see what it meant to them, and then when you talk to another group of people to see that it meant when something doesn't mean anything to somebody, when they don't see you as human or as less than, you'd be surprised at what they can do to you because they've detached your humanity. Therefore, you're nothing. It's almost the way you squish an ant or a fly. You don't really matter, and it's sad that we have a society of people that are seen as flies and ants.
Yeah, and if they close that up, if they close the White Hospital first, like the whole time that Homer G. Simpson was open, they always had that black cloud over their head, like, oh, they're gonna close this down. But if they closed that White Hospital down, they would have known, oh, they coming for us next, and they would have been able to rally up a protest, a real protest, about it. But the fact that they're like, no, we gotta get rid of this first, but like just do it like a quick airstrike,
Right. That's the best way to describe it. And you said an airstrike on a hospital in this community. What? I mean, that doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense.
What's interesting too, you touched on Kelly and Brian, is with the White Hospital closing, those people were never segregated. They could just go to another hospital. They were like, okay, it's just a city-owned hospital. Who cares?
Let's go over to the other city.
And their community wasn't affected by that. But Homer G. Phillips was like, that's like someone coming to your front yard. Like, you know what? I paid for my house. You know what I'm saying? It's like, this is my house. And if someone came here and said, you got to move, I'm like, wait a minute, but this is my place. You can't remove me.
Yeah.
But that's how they felt about that hospital. It wasn't just a place. It was their home. And this was a place that they felt they owned, that was theirs. and they did feel very passionate about it, and that's why I think they went after Homer G. Phillips first. Yes,
Right.
They needed to close it, but they knew that it was more than just a hospital, that it represented their community. And it really, for them to go in the way that they did, it definitely spoke to not only uh, demoralizing that community, but just like Brian was saying, they didn't think anything of it, but they knew that the fight would be bigger, but it still was like they really didn't care. There's so many levels that you could take it to with that
Yeah,
play.
and another thing that really stood out, that really kind of touches on what's going on today, is that like the nurses were supplied with like the best amenities, like especially footwear, because they needed good footwear. So they were, custom, shoes that would, help them immensely. They would have been dead without them, and even like the ice cream thing, and even the ice cream
compared
thing.
to what they have today.
But like right now, you have billions of dollars being spent on law enforcement. There's cities that have freaking tanks. But the nurses and the doctors that are fighting this COVID virus, like they barely have anything. And that was something that really like touched me in this documentary.
Like they can't even get masks, and this is why we really hope that the film being in distribution, that a lot of people will get a chance to see it and actually see how important medical facilities are. And whether you believe in socialized medicine or not, people don't think about illness until they get sick, which is sad. It's like if we would do the preventative, of course, with healthcare and all of that. I mean, like your health and fitness and all of that, that'll help. But even if you're healthy, you still get sick. And I think that what you said, you hit a nail on the head with how these doctors and nurses are struggling. They can't even get masks, more or less. I mean, that's just frightening to me. And then the disrespect of the public to go out without masks, and they don't even care. And I don't know where that comes from, and I don't know why they think that when they do get sick and then they have to go to these hospitals, then what? But it's like, why are we so reactionary and not proactive? I don't understand.
Always. That's what this is what like the society's become. It's so reactionary and being like, oh, you can't tell me what to do, and like,
what does that have to do with anything?
It's so funny because it goes from you can't tell me what to do, and then when it doesn't work out, it's like, well, nobody told me.
Right.
Because they were telling you.
Or treat me now. I don't care what's going on. Treat me now.
Yeah. I think, what, that reminded me, it was something that you said that was one, and I couldn't believe it when I heard it. It's like the ultimate salt in the wound, where not only were they, closing this hospital, and like you touched on it, Joyce, where you were saying others couldn't go get health care, but officers would go get gunshot wounds in clear across town and would make sure they were driven directly to Homer G. Phillips, where the best doctors were, because they knew they were going to come up their table.
Right.
That is mind-boggling to me. But the people from outside can come get care here, but the people here, you can't get any health care anywhere. Right. And you know what? Then we're going to take your hospital away. It's constantly, the legs are constantly being chopped. But at the same time, we constantly keep finding ways to, it's like that scrambling up to the next person's shoulders to stand on before those legs get chopped. Then you got to go to the next person because they're constantly, and once that hospital is gone, now these doctors and nurses, some of you are still the best, but you need a place to work. Well, you can come over here and work in this white hospital here, and you can come work over here and continue to give that great medical care that you've been giving. But if now your people that you've been treating, they can't come over to these hospitals. But that's okay now, because now we have the reputation of having one of the best top doctors here. It's mind-boggling, and I think that was one of the reasons why we looked at this story. Like, this story has to be told because it has so many layers. Honestly, to me, the story of Homer G. Phillips is not done being told. I think, to me, we've told the first installment, but there's just so many layers to this story. It is definitely a docuseries, and you pick what you think. Okay, this is this is the avenue that we're going to tell at the beginning. And we just have hours and hours of footage that we haven't used.
Right.
And also, I think there's more interviews to have, because I think now we should be able to sit with these city officials, especially in today's climate, explaining what happened then and how we don't go back there now, because that's what we're definitely moving that direction. There's voices and there's people that we weren't able to talk to that I would love to give them the opportunity to present themselves, because again, we're just starting the conversation, and unless we have conversations just like this, we'll be right back at the same spot we were, or we'll be thinking we made progress that we realize we've never made. Right. Because we talked about it, but there's no actionable steps on what we're going to do.
Right, and I want to follow up on what Brian was saying. When white people, whether they be law enforcement, like he said, got shot, they could actually go to Homer G. Phillips to be treated, but the people from Homer G. Phillips could not go to a white hospital and receive the same treatment. And you can't imagine the discipline that these doctors and nurses had to have when they were working on these white police officers, that they could easily accidentally slip and do something to them, and they didn't. And that's sort of the story of Black people, period. You know, we're always, because it makes no sense. You want us to work in the white households and take care of your kids, but yet you want to kill us.
Yeah, even during these,
that makes no sense, right?
Yeah, even during these protests, there was that photo of a Black Lives Matter protester carrying carrying somebody, whether it was a cop who was white, to safety because he got hurt, and that was crazy because in Color of Medicine there was that time about the doctor in Korea that fought
Dr. Oscar Jackson. And we met him. And he is no longer, he has passed away, but his wife, Norma, they're such a nice couple. And we thank them so much for letting us interview him. And he talked about that, about how he had to get the white doctors in Korea to treat, you're in Korea fighting, but everyone that was in Korea wasn't against you, but they didn't even want the Koreans in their hospital. It's like we're always the liaison to help other people, but when it comes to us having help, we're not allowed to have that. And what Brian was saying about, we actually had over 8 hours of footage, because I interviewed over almost 100 people, but we weren't able to put all those people in the documentary because it would have been too long. So we would want to go back and hopefully do a docuseries to cover all those other doctors, because the ones who were in the last few years, like the 60s and the 70s, they're still out there. And I've been bombarded with phone calls, because we're in California. There are people here, because we had a screening here in California, and people that were in the audience were saying, my father was trained at that hospital, or my aunt trained at that. So it's worldwide and nationwide. We would love to continue showing that, but we really had to make some really big decisions on who to include. Because it was very difficult, because there were so many amazing stories and some really fun stories too. We were talking about, there was a story where this girl, even from the patients, because we wanted to include some of the patients, but it was just too long, right? And there was this one woman I interviewed, and she said she was a little kid at the time, and she said that her mom took her to go get her shots, and she said she hated needles, right? So she said the minute the doctor pulled the needle out, she took off running, ran out the door, down the street, and she said that doctor took off after her and chased her down and gave her shot. They probably had to tackle her, right? But I mean, those are the fun stories too. I mean, there was a lot of really fun stories in this hospital. It wasn't all disparity and horror and all that.
Yeah, like the card games and
they had a lot of fun too. Yeah, and I would love to show that too, of all the positive things. It was like a big family.
Yeah, everybody seemed to have fun there, whether they were, living there, during their training or whatnot, or just everybody seemed to have fun there too,
Right. And all those stories needed to be told. But again, as Brian said, we have been approached about turning it into a docuseries. And we're really open to that. We just have other projects we're working on right now, but that can also be in the queue of projects. We definitely would love to do that. And if you know anyone people can champion, and they can go to our website and say, hey, yeah, we want to see the docuseries,
Yeah.
put your word out there, and maybe it'll happen, So it's definitely something we would like to do.
Yeah. To kind
Yeah.
of wrap things up, like, what do you hope ultimately people get out of watching The Color of Medicine?
You want to go ahead, Joyce?
Um, I think what people could get out of this is whenever we've had screenings, Kelly, there was always a range of emotions from laughter to crying to people gasping to people being angry. I mean, it really touches on every
Yeah.
emotion. And I think what I would like to see people get out of it is the importance of community, the importance of healthcare, and the importance of inclusion, and the importance of desegregation, that people need to work together to have the best, that there can't be any separation from that, and that communities need to own their health care. I think that's the problem. Communities don't own their health care.
Yeah.
And I think communities need to champion health professionals more. Don't just say, oh, you need to go to that trade school and become a nurse. I think the community needs to rally around that nurse and say, we will come, I will be your first patient when you graduate. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I think you need to make these people feel that what they're doing is really important. And it's not just a job, that it's a career. And that you're
because it's a hard road becoming a medical professional of any,
Absolutely.
and it can be a very lonely, existence, especially when, well, the whole time, going through the education and everything, the long hours. That's a lonely journey. So you gotta, feel like there's people around you supporting you.
Right. But and that's absolutely right. But I also mean, like, there should be a community, and that's what I'm saying. Like, where, just like how Homer G. Phillips was, like, you should be able, like say for instance, if I wanted to be a nurse and if I were a young kid or whatever, I should be able to work at a hospital that's in my own neighborhood. I shouldn't have to travel 50 miles to go work at a hospital that you don't see me in that hospital. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm Black, I shouldn't have to go just work at this white hospital over in whatever. I should be able to work in my own community where I may see Mr. Johnson down the street at the hospital. I think that's what makes people feel more comfortable and feel like, that they're really doing something for their community. That's what I hope people get out of this.
Yeah, because when you start that journey to becoming a medical professional, you're just being thrown into a system, and who knows where you'll end up, where the opportunities are open for you, Right. And like you said, there should be a way where it's like, I want to be a medical professional in my neighborhood. I want to be able to take care of my neighbors,
Right.
Like, I want to be able to live here and be like, oh, come see me in my office,
Right.
Stuff like that.
And that's so important because for a fact, I mean, I know when I was growing up, like, I got sick and my mother called Dr. Robinson. And I actually went to his office because, hey, my next door neighbor and I mean, it's not that, oh, he's a doctor. It's like, this is in my community. And like you said, what if something happened here or you were choking or something, your next door neighbor's a nurse. So, but a lot of people don't even know their neighbors anymore. I mean, It's just horrible.
I don't even know what the closest hospital is to where I live.
It is.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yeah, we've gone away from that sense of community, being raised by a village, being raised by when your neighbor told you to do something, it was just like your parents telling you.
Right.
We've definitely gone away from that, but I really hope people get from this film. If I could like sum it up or maybe kind of break it down, it would be, I hope we can at least get inspiration and understanding of what these people went through and why they went through what they went through. And what we're trying to do right now is very difficult. So I'm hoping what these doctors and the long road they took is inspiration enough to see that, yes, what you're going through, it is going to be difficult. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is possible. Yeah. When I see this story, it shows me of what is possible if you're willing to make the sacrifice. I'm not talking about it. Yes, there's going to be a lot of things that are wrong. It's not going to be fair. and it's going to be harder for you. But knowing that and still being able to go in and succeed, that level of inspiration, and even bigger than that, I hope that there are more conversations like this started, because we've done quite a few interviews on this film, and honestly, this has probably been my favorite
Oh,
because of
thank you.
Yes, it's a
the
really good interview.
conversation, man, the
Thank you.
conversation and your questions. And it's beneficial for us, for filmmakers, because I'm hearing like the questions you're asking, you dissected the film so much, but it
Wow.
spurs questions. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that, because it one enforces what we know, and then it also brings in questions within our myself about it. Well, I've never thought about it this way. I'm like taking me all the way back to my school and thinking about, how I felt being one of the only students there, but growing, understanding twofold, why I was put there to excel and getting comfortable being uncomfortable. That was why the one film student came to me and touched me so much when they broke down, because what they said was, I am the only black person in all of my classes. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not even from here. I don't have too many friends. And this is extremely hard. I'm not doing that well. One of my instructors talked to me, and it's all because I'm missing home. But he said, when I saw that and what they went through, I realized not only one, do I have a responsibility, but my struggle is not that bad. I didn't have to say nothing. I got teary eyed listening at all of
Wow,
this. And
wow.
thank you guys for bringing that they inspired one person enough to recorrect his journey and keep doing what he's doing. I don't need to get nothing else from the film but that.
Yeah, because sometimes everybody has their own struggles,
Mhm.
and everybody in you should never discount anyone's struggle. It's all
Yeah.
different. But sometimes when you see other people's struggles, it definitely reframes what you're going through, and definitely can
Mhm.
pick things out to be like, you know what? If I do this and then this, maybe I can get past my stuff, because that
Right.
person is still going on with their lives, and their struggle is
Exactly.
even harder.
Yes. That's
And I think
definitely it. Yeah.
and I think as a filmmaker, this is exactly what you do. This is why you're a filmmaker and a storyteller.
Yeah.
A lot of people look at it from the accolades. Oh, I can say I'm a director. No, this is why, because you make film. You do this and you tell stories because of how it affects people.
Yeah.
People will never forget this. This will be a part of history forever.
Mhm.
It will always be out there. So to me, this is the epitome of storytelling, being able to put this out there, and it's a part of history. I mean, to me, it's the best reward ever. It's
Yeah.
far better than a monetary award
Yeah.
at all. It's all about getting the story out there.
Very true.
So what's next for both of you? Is there anything that you guys can talk about you're working on?
Yeah, we're actually, we just actually dropped another movie, but it's completely different.
So,
um, it's called excuse me, I'm sorry. It's called Hidden Orchard Mysteries.
yeah.
What is it? The case of the Airbnb robbery.
Mhm.
And Brian directed it, and he wrote the screenplay, and the story idea was mine, and him and I came together, and we completely went polar opposite in a sense, but it does kind of have the same message
Yeah.
about diversity and everything. But it was such a fun escape to do,
Oh, definitely.
because like you said, with everything happening right now, it's a perfect film for parents
Yeah.
to show their kids so that you can have some fun. I grew up on Nancy Drew. Brian grew up on Encyclopedia Brown, and we just said, you know what, let's do something fun. And it actually still shows people of color in non-traditional roles that you have never really seen them in.
That's good.
And that is, normally you see Nancy Drew, her friend, and I think on the CW right now, she's got her minority friends in the background. They're always the helpers,
Always, yeah.
but yeah, but in ours, they are the Nancy Drews. That we've got two great actresses, black. One is black and one is Asian and Italian. She's mixed, and the other young lady is African American, and they do an amazing job. And we just dropped that film on June 16th, just earlier this week. So
Okay.
both The Color Medicine and Hidden Orchard Mysteries, the case of the Airbnb robbery, are both available on DVD, SVOD, all the platforms. And Brian can talk about what's up
Oh, I'm
next.
just saying. I know our distributor will kill us if
Yeah,
they're
so we
both
don't
streaming
say.
now on Fandango, Vudu, iTunes, Google Play, Vimeo. They're on your on-demand streaming
Everywhere.
services. So you can find both of those films everywhere. But Hidden Orchard Mysteries was something that was very, close to my heart. It was something that we. It's one of those projects that you talk about doing, and then you finally get the opportunity to go and do it. And again, being a fan of Encyclopedia Brown, and I love working with kids. And the two kids that we have were just amazing. I mean, you fall in love with them, and to be able to go tell our version of Nancy Drew. And I honestly, we did an interview about the film a couple days ago, and I really think that that film is very representative of what you see in the streets today. Everybody marching. It's a multicultural cast, and
Mm-hmm.
it's weird because there's such a pull when you're an independent filmmaker, especially a filmmaker of color. Of when you make things, everything that you see has to be representative of you and your experience. Well, in my day-to-day experience, I experience all types of people. So
Mm-hmm.
I would never go make a film where I'm only going to experience one type of people. It's just, and especially in this kids film, it just really, I think everything that we're out there together, hand in hand, protesting for, this is that view that we're after is what you see in this film.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This I want to call it a utopia because it doesn't exist yet, but we're still
Right. What
going at.
actually does exist, yeah. The what we saw,
Mhm.
what we did in this movie, like we kind of joked and laughed about some of the reviews because they would always say, "Oh, they're in this upper class, black community, like it's not real or something." And it's like, no, it's very real. This is something that people live in every day. But it just goes to show
Right.
you how people view us. Like if it's
There's
not
upper
an
class
urban,
black people. There's nerdy black people.
yeah, there's
Black people
all
are not a
types.
monolith.
Right, right,
There's
right.
black
And that's
people of
what we
all
showed.
types of like weird whatever, and
Yeah, we're normal people. We exist in
there's
all types of
goths,
environments.
there's all that.
Right.
It's
We're
just
monsters. We
So
can be in
true.
outer space. We can be everywhere, but they
Right.
always see us as one entity. But Brian and I really had a good time doing this film, and the things that we are looking forward to. The film is going to be an installment. We were going to be doing more than one. We're actually in the process of working on the next installment of the
work.
Hidden Orchard Mysteries, and we have quite a few other projects lined up as well in different genres, horror, thrillers. We're just not stopping. We're
Yeah,
just going to
don't
keep
stop.
moving forward.
Can't stop,
Hopefully
won't
we'll be
stop.
on your show again.
Yeah, man. Always, man. Can't stop, won't stop, man. Keep it moving.
Definitely,
Thank
definitely.
you.
And hopefully we'll also be able to get that docu series, and we'll be able to get back
Yeah.
to that until
Definitely.
break that down into installments. And I would love to give people little, maybe I would say 7 to 10 30-minute stories of more different aspects of Homer G. Phillips, like you said, from the patients to the people that work there,
Yeah.
to the communities, to the shop owners, because this. You can't separate the hospital from the community and the
Right.
community from the hospital because they were all one. And that's another thing we would really like to delve into that, because and that's another reason why they were made such an effort to remove that hospital, because once you close the hospital, we don't have to worry about the community is going to collapse.
Yeah. And an
That's exactly
interesting
what happened. Yeah.
And an interesting point, like when Brian was saying about doing the docu-series, there were stories, of course, like we said, that weren't able to be put into the film. There was a gentleman who, I don't recall his name right at the moment, but he was a car salesman who actually owned a car dealership, I'm sorry. And he actually was on the staff of the hospital as an administrator.
Yeah.
And his car dealership was so successful, he became the largest African American dealership in the United States, and he actually helped fund Obama's campaign.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he was out of Chicago. He actually went from St. Louis to Chicago, and I would love to include him. We tried to reach out to his family, but we, like I said, there's so many stories that kind of reflect everything that's happening,
Yeah.
And if everything that happened at Homer G. Phillips is affecting things today, and that's one of the docu-series stories I would love to include.
Yeah,
You
and
just
like
never know.
during that time frame when this was, this hospital was open, like there's other known aspects of just history and culture in St.
Yeah.
Louis, whether it's
Mhm.
entertainment, the music, blues, and
Yeah.
all that, that when you have like a hospital like that, that's like a centerpiece of that
Mm-hmm.
community, because like you said, everybody needs health care at some point,
Mm-hmm.
so
That's very
so it
true.
does touch to every other aspect of the community and culture and society and entertainment that was going on in St. Louis during those decades.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's a very rich history of St. Louis. Like I said, that I learned that I had no idea about. St. Louis is a very um, iconic place, but it's weird. It's very iconic with its music roots and its cultural roots, but it's also very you can still feel the remnants of segregation there because the fact that those schools weren't desegregated until 1980, I swear I thought that was a typo when I read that. That can't be.
That's
But
crazy.
when you're there and in some of those areas, you can still feel it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a bit. Yeah, you can still feel it. And then there's unfortunately a lot of signage when you're driving around. You definitely see the remnants of a past society that is not too happy about the present. Yeah, I have to say a nice way of saying that if they could go around and throw shackles on people, they would not hesitate in 1 second. And I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying the fact that you go around and you still see like how people talk about. I'm not talking about statues or things like that. Just signs that are still hanging out in front of stores and murals that are in windows that were never removed. It's because to them, the people that live in that area, those thoughts and those feelings have never been removed from them.
Yeah, and that
That's
was
why the
that was like the fuel of the fire of what happened in Ferguson. Was
Oh
yes.
yeah.
that
Yes.
because that all still existed, and that's what fueled all that.
Yes,
Yeah.
those emotions are still there, and it's like something like this just brings up a problem that has never been solved. But again, it all starts with having the conversation. People need to get comfortable saying how they feel and why they feel that way, and then the other side needs to get comfortable saying how they feel and why they feel that way. And we either agree or we agree not to agree, and we understand from there. But there's so much I think conversations had behind people's backs, and some people that you thought were on your side. When this happens, you realize no,
Like,
and they
oh,
don't even have any understanding
yeah.
of where you're coming from.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you
So
feel
it's
like that? Oh, I had no idea.
exactly. I mean, friendships
Oh,
lost. There's been such a divide created by this, but I think the bigger problem is that I think our world was so sick and so congested that it had to stop itself and make people pay attention. Like, okay, I'm gonna stop and y'all
Mm-hmm.
figure this out because this we can't keep going this way.
True. True.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
and
COVID
I mean,
19, as horrible as it is, it actually, like Brian said, has made people stop and examine their entire existence.
so that
exactly.
it shined light on so much things that are arbitrary that shouldn't
Yes,
exist.
yes.
So many things that are broken. That some things like you're just sitting there now and you're like, okay, why did this law exist? Like we're being
Right, right.
like even to like the even to some of the like things that you wouldn't think are that bad, like jobs that you can work from home. You're like,
Mhm.
oh, we can work from home actually doing my job,
Right, when they had been talking about doing, and you're so right, because before that was like looked down upon, like people are like, no, we can't do that. Now it's going to be the new norm, and it actually provides so many positive things.
Yeah.
Less pollution in the air. People don't have to spend the money on gas. They
Yeah.
don't have to put the wear and tear on their car, and they could have done this a long time ago, but for whatever reason they
Right.
chose not to. And again, it's being reactionary instead of being proactive.
Did
right?
you see how many parts of the world like started to just naturally grow like once we like the pandemic really started? Like I hear out in LA that it went from being smog filled
Right.
to being the cleanest air in the world.
We
Yeah,
have had some of the most beautiful weather. It
that's
is
crazy.
amazing. It really is. I think it's almost as if I don't know if Mother Nature needed to heal herself because
Exactly.
it really has made a huge difference. I mean, the fact that you could always look downtown to our skyline and you could just see the level. I mean,
It's
literally
small.
see the
Mhm.
level of pollution and soot in the air. That's gone.
Mhm.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
completely gone. So it is one of those things where we needed something to not. What I think the problem before, because again, there's so many people out saying we've been saying Black Lives Matter, we've been saying all
Yeah.
lives matter, but we've never had a situation where the world can stop. You can't go to work. You can't go to any of your jobs. You can't go see your friends. Not pay attention to this.
Right.
Yeah.
Deal with this issue. And while you're looking at this issue, guess what? That issue kind of is related to this issue, which is related to this issue.
Yep.
So you got to deal with this. You can no longer kind of turn a blind eye to it. I was joking with a few friends. I say it's almost like not that I've ever been, but hearing the stories, it's like going to prison. When you go to prison, you got to pick a side. You can't be in prison and tell I'm neutral. I'm not this.
Right.
It's come to that right now. You have to pick a side. You have to choose, because in not choosing, you've made a decision in not doing that also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we are right now. And it's just so great to see all the communities coming together and doing something. I mean, the fact that Black Lives Matter has teamed up with the LBGT community, come on.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like, you know what, if you're going to push a line, push it now and push it as hard as you can ever push it, and do not stop. Because what happens is these protests go on for a while, the loud voice goes on, and then it eventually calms down and we go back to what we've been doing.
Because all these laws that happen affect other people you wouldn't even know. Like, there was this law that was supposed to go against sex trafficking. It was called Fosta Sesta. And what that did was it hurt sex workers being able to, because the main thing is that like companies like Facebook and companies not even just like online, just companies in general had to basically police themselves in regards to sexual content, to combat sex trafficking. But nobody wanted to put the effort and the resources to effectively do that. So what they're doing is banning any sort of sex content. And what's that's doing is hurting sex workers. It's hurting education about sex. It's hurting the LGBTQ community. It's going down these lines of hurting like all these people when it's not even really combating the thing that you're telling it's combating, Right. And that's what happens with these laws. Like laws that help Black folks can also help all these other people who are being discriminated against, and it all goes. It's like this domino effect. So to be a part, to definitely be a part of the Black Lives Matter movement and get laws passed to help them will help everybody else.
Exactly.
And it's interesting.
I'm sorry. Okay. Go ahead. One point real quick is it's so great that you said that, because so many times the comment is made that where there's people fighting and then there's these Black people over here. These Black people's lives matter also. And the way you just stated, no, by making sure their rights are ensured, you're solidifying some of your rights also, and making sure these things, because if they can take them from us, guarantee they're just working. Eventually some of these same rights that we have, it'll be affecting you that you don't have them.
Like they say, like what they'll do to the least of us, they'll do to all of us.
Exactly. That's very true.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
is what I've been seeing, like on the social media train. Everybody's making comments, and I've had friends that that I know personally, not just on Facebook. Everybody's making comments like, why do we have affirmative action, and why do we have, and this, and it's like, it's so difficult to explain to people. They keep saying, well, we shouldn't have affirmative action, because then that's like you're trying to only specify this one race, and it's like I just don't really know how to address that, because,
and it's tiring to keep on saying it over and over again,
right? And they just don't get it, and they don't understand. I try to explain it. I said, well, with you assimilate. You say, well, why are they making why do we have to have a law for this? And I said, because you, just like if I were talking to you, you can step outside and not have to worry about a cop looking at you twice, but we do. Even if you're a law-abiding citizen, it doesn't matter. It's just that we can't rub this off. This is,
I could be a criminal, man. I could have been doing some shit and still walk out and look
exactly.
and not be, but Black folks, they can fit a vague description, and next thing you know, they have guns drawn on them by the cops,
Oh yeah, and no matter what you do, you could be in the store. I mean, because this has happened to me, where I could be in the store and I was on the phone talking to Brian actually, and I'm walking to the store picking up all my items of cosmetics, and this guard was following me around. I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, I don't think I look like a criminal, But this is the stuff we deal with on a daily basis, and I don't get why some people don't understand.
And it's
that.
wild to me. A lot of the incidences when like these, police brutality or the killings, it's like almost like if you put in common sense, if they were really being the person that you thought they would be, why would they be doing the thing that they're doing at that particular time? Why would a black man just be strolling down
Right.
a main road with his
Right,
earbuds on if he just like robbed a bank?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They don't think about any of that stuff,
No.
And it
Yeah.
is and the fact that our people have been fighting this for decades and for centuries, because I don't know, a century is 100 years, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
4 centuries, going on 500 years almost, that we've been dealing with this, and yet people still sit there like they're perplexed, like they don't get it.
Like, I don't get it. Like, yeah.
I don't get it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, it's exhausting.
Yeah, and it's like we're at this point now where we have the internet, we have Google, and you can literally type up the question that you want to be known, and there'll be resources, there'll be news articles that explicitly will answer your question. It's
Exactly.
more easier than ever to get some firsthand knowledge from black folks about why something is happening.
Yeah, that's very true. And I still think the change, it has to happen with breaking down some of the systems because I mean, just like a black man, I'm sure there are more horror stories than mine, but I can think back to times where I've had police officers pull guns on me. And the worst experience that I ever had that I constantly keep thinking back to was driving with my brother and being pulled over. And they always tell you, well, police can't pull you over without probable cause. And the police officer came up to the car and said, you know what my probable cause for pulling you over is? Because you a nigga in Torrance.
Whoa.
That was it.
I could not. What's your response? And then got back in his car and followed us till we left the city of Torrance. So that's what I'm saying. And as much as that pissed me off, when I think back to it, he was taught that. He didn't just come to work that day and start. That system has implemented that. So he is doing what the system he worked for has taught him to do.
Word.
That's what, it's a systematic problem.
And no, I was thinking about this, like thinking about all the things, like definitely just even the recent killings, what these people were thought to be doing at the time, and then thinking about my own experiences. Over 10 years ago, I got pulled over and arrested for a DUI.
Mm-hmm.
Yo, a DUI is serious,
It is. It's very
people.
serious.
I could have killed myself. I could have killed other people. I know people who have lost people because of that. I was doing something serious. I was doing something irresponsible. And guess what? I got pulled over by a cop who was known in the Detroit PD for being kind of crazy. I think I actually got pulled over for him once before, years before that, for speeding. And in that time, apparently his partner committed suicide. So he was a little off of his rocker. The whole bar scene in downtown Detroit knew of this guy because he always harassed them at the end of the night. So I had a couple friends who were Detroit cops and knew of this guy. Never met him, but knew of this guy because of his reputation. But guess what? When I got pulled over, he did not. He may say some harassing, dickish comments that all cops say, but no, he didn't. He wasn't physical with me. He put me into the cop car, just gently. I had a bag with my laptop in it. They took care of that, and pretty much I was taken care of, and I was doing something that was a lot worse than what
the gentleman that lost his
than
life.
all these, black folks that are getting killed by police were doing. And I'm sitting there like, I was sitting there recently and I'm like, holy crap. Like I was doing something that was totally worse and dangerous for the community. And I was like treated with kid gloves, and it's wild that there's such a differential. like difference between how someone like
Yeah.
me is treated and then how black folks are treated, and it's just like
Right.
wow, this is crazy,
Yeah, and
It's
the
interesting
bad thing
story.
is that's such a I'm sorry that's such a great story, and you hate to simplify it to something as simple as skin, but it's the difference is, or from my experience, is that because I can see it when I saw that officer pull out his gun. What I more saw was his arm trembling and the fear in his eyes that I may do something. It's that it's and I really think it's taught. It's like it's us, him, or you or me. If you wait, he's going to get you. It's that you're initially seen as a threat every time you don't have any weapons on you, or it got to the point like how many weapons or drugs have you sold today? Like, are you
Right.
kidding?
You know
It's
what's
just
funny
that
about your story is that I don't know if they really do it now because there's a lot of white people that go into Detroit, but back in the day when there was a real, I grew up right off of, the famously known 8 Mile. And,
Oh, okay, okay.
and
I'm
I
back.
know the 8 Mile divide was
Mhm.
heavy when I grew up. Like
Yeah,
white people on that side, black people on that side.
yeah,
And
yeah.
there was this just thing over your head that the people on the other side of 8 Mile, the black folks, they, might be bad people. From an
Right.
early age, I knew that was bullshit. I just couldn't feel that was right.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of times if there was white people driving in the streets of Detroit, they might get pulled over by the cops, but they were told to leave for their safety.
Wow,
Wow.
wow, wow, wow. That's
Wow. And yeah, that's the kind of stuff. Like when
yeah.
when you gentlemen are talking about those stories, it drives me insane
And those
because
kids were probably buying drugs.
Oh, exactly.
They were
Exactly. If they not
but you're judged. I mean,
came
there's
from
no reason that when you look at statistics, like you and Brian may be in the same age group, you both probably have the same educational background, the same economic background, but yet, and I'm asking you this, Kelly, has anyone ever pulled a gun on you and put it in your face in
No,
your entire lifetime?
never.
Okay,
Not
there you go. Now, that's all you need to say is no.
no.
And in Brian's lifetime, he's not in the military. He's never served in any wars, but yet you've had a gun pulled on you. I mean,
and
that's
not
insane.
but the weird thing is, and I'm not talking about another, you know, gang member or from the people that are supposed to be protecting you, the police
Right.
officers.
And I've been in
I
some
don't
hoods in
believe
Detroit.
that
I've
this
I've
was
been
the only night that I didn't think I was going to make it home. Getting
Right.
pulled over, 2 police officers. They searched the whole car, didn't find anything, and I'll never forget this. Them two talking, and one of the officers, the thing that got me, this was probably, I think I was more scared of this than the NIT and the gun.
Right.
When I saw the officer putting on his black gloves and he was and he was clicking them on and asking his other officer, "What do you got? What do you want to do with them? Like, we got the whole night free."
Whoa. Ooh.
And the
That-
only thing that saved us was on their patrol, up on their walkie-talkies, a shooting had just happened. So they immediately threw our license back and said, "You guys are lucky," and got in the car and took off.
Wow. That must be
We
frightening.
didn't even talk in the car on the way home, just thinking of what that. To this day, I don't know how that one could have turned out. It
Yeah.
just
That's
it's
yeah.
crazy to think about, but it wasn't. And again, it wasn't what he said, how he said what he said in his. You saw him getting ready. Like, where are they about to take us, and what are they about to do?
Mhm.
But they had the whole night free and having this conversation in front of us, very jokingly between this. So, what do you want to do with them? And what does it require you putting on your black gloves for? That was my question.
Wow. That's terrifying.
And no one should have to deal with that. Nobody,
Right.
And that's the scary thing about all of this. And when these police officers, like Brian was saying, this is just the first tier, because even when you looked at Homer G. Phillips Hospital in the beginning, where some of the doctors talked about how the patients were being put under water heaters or whatever in the hospital, where it was dripping water, and one doctor got electrocuted, and I mean, that's almost the same thing in a sense of they just discarded our lives like we just don't mean anything, but yet we're put in your households to take care of your children.
Yeah,
Huh?
there's all these things that black folks were these jobs that
Like
black folks were able
oxymoron, right?
got opportunities to do for white people that you're like, okay, I can do this, but
I'm
like,
less than
yeah,
human. But
like,
I can feed and breastfeed your kids, and but yet I'm not of any value. And of course, half of the black population is mixed because your slave owning husband was out there having sex with the black woman
yeah,
because you don't want to, and giving birth to these kids. I mean, there's just you know,
Yeah, I just say
I
I
don't
would
know
say
where to
because
put it.
it can really just boggle your mind to the point where you get so frustrated you do nothing. And I think that's part of what the system does. The system is bigger than your individual problem, therefore the system wins. But it's great to see I think the energy in the young people that are out. And
Yeah.
at first, when I was seeing some of these protests, again, I'm glad when the fact that they're peaceful, because when they were violent, and they were turning into riots and it wasn't the people protesting, I didn't think that's not an avenue you have your kid out there.
yeah,
But
Right.
it's so great to see the protesting going on now. And I honestly say I love seeing white families and black families with their kids
Mm-hmm.
out there, because racism is something that is taught. You don't grow up knowing that.
right.
So seeing the lines of where it's being broken, and the fact that they are trying to pass this down onto their youth, it definitely it's a long fight. It's definitely going to be a long fight, but I think it's now crossed over into a generation that is willing to take those long strides, because you have a younger crowd doing it and they're continually passing it down into a even generation younger than them. And that's what it needs to be, to the point where the racism is so called out, you can't do anything but deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
We're getting to that point where we know all the problems now. We just need to deal with them, not to the point where, now there may be a problem over here, but if nobody says anything about it, we just won't look over there. We've done that long. That's why we're here, because if you we always address a problem, but if you don't deal with it, it's always going to bring itself back up. That's We've never dealt with it. We've addressed it, but we've never dealt with it. And I think we've gotten to the point now where we're slowly starting to deal with it. But again, it's going to be
yeah,
baby steps. And as long as they're baby steps forward and not backward, I'm okay with that.
definitely.
Yeah, and with people putting their foot on somebody's neck, these people need to keep their foot on society's neck until something changes. It's like,
Definitely.
don't stop, like pass the
Very true.
baton. And because we were saying that when these people go back to work, because when people get the chance to start going back to work and everything, that's what I think society is waiting on. The racist society is for, oh, it'll die down, let the black people get out there and whatever. No, but no, I want people to continue, not necessarily, I don't want them to riot or anything, but I definitely want people to continue to protest. And I
Right.
mean, you know what, even if you can only go out there on the weekends, just keep doing it,
Or even
because
standing up for yourself more at your job.
Exactly.
exactly,
You know,
wherever you can stand
Exactly.
up, that's where
Yeah.
you should do it. Yeah, make a difference.
That's very true. That's very true.
Mm-hmm.
all right, it's been great talking with both of you. Very powerful interview. Like,
Thank
thank you for coming on and having this very open discussion about the color of
Mhm.
medicine and everything that it's sort of, everything involved into it, man. It's been great talking with both of you. Where can people go? You already plugged both your projects, but where can people go online to get more information about those projects and to follow both of you?
Well, the Color Medicine, they both have websites. The Color Medicine's website is done really well. You can find out as much information as you want about the film.
Yeah.
It's at www.thecolorofmedicine.com. That's all you have to put in, all as one long word,
Yep.
and it'll pop up. And it has everything. It'll even tell you where the film is available, and it's available on all formats. And as far as and we have all social media handles. So when you go to the website, you can click on all the social media handles: Facebook, Instagram,
Nice.
Twitter. They're all there. The same with Hidden Orchard Mysteries. That website is www Hidden Orchard Mysteries with an S movie.com. So Hidden Orchard Mysteries movie.com. And all of that, and that's the handles are all on that website as well. So but if they just Google Hidden Orchard Mysteries, the case of the Airbnb robbery, it'll all come up. So that's where everybody can find out information. And they're on all streaming formats. Both films are out right now on all streaming formats that Brian had mentioned: iTunes, Vudu, Fandango, Vimeo, Google Play. What else, Brian? Amazon
Um,
Prime,
yeah,
Amazon
on your
Instant.
local cable provider on
Yeah.
demand, like Xfinity,
Hmm.
Comcast, whatever your local cable provider is, it's on your on demand system through
Mhm.
that as well. And I think give out your personal
Oh yeah, we our and you can look me up under Fitzpatrick Joyce, and on Facebook I'm Joyce Marie Fitzpatrick. But my production company is Flat Cat, and then there's a hyphen productions.com, and that website is up so people can learn a little bit more about me. And if you go on IMDb, Internet Movie Database.com, you can see all of the shows that I used to work on. So those are my handles.
Cool.
right. You can find me. All of my handles are at Picasso72, which is Pixasso 72, and my website will be tunnelvisionfilms.com. It's very simple. And if you can't find me through any of that, you can always type in Brian C. Shackelford in Google, and it will point you to me, because there's a few Brian Shacklefords out there, but there's only one Brian C. Shackelford. And unfortunately, that's me. So if you type that in, you must be trying to find me. So that's what you're gonna find. But man, like I said, Kelly, I can't thank you enough, man, for
Yes,
your
great
conversation,
interview.
man, and just the format of this conversation. It's so greatly appreciated, and your knowledge of the film, man. That
Yeah.
I'm beyond impressed, and thank you for helping us get the word out and starting the conversation. Man, this is a great conversation.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I had a great time talking with both of you. Thank you for listening to the Fresh is the Word podcast, hosted and produced by myself, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier, empowered by Anchor at anchor.fm/Fresh is the Word. Fresh is the Word theme music provided by Steve O. You can find more of his productions at iamsteveo.bandcamp.com, and that's EYEAMSTEVEO.bandcamp.com. Fresh is the Word is available on all major streaming platforms. Please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. If you want to support Fresh is the Word, please consider pledging via Patreon at patreon.com/freshisthe-word. Follow Fresh is the Word on social media on Twitter at Fresh is the Pod, on Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Fresh is the Word. For more information about Fresh is the Word and our other podcasts, Breaking Records and Renaissance Soul, and a collection of pop culture articles and reviews, please visit freshithepodcast.com. Thank you for listening and your support. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.